today for this really promises to be a really wonderful presentation from four of our former trainees who participated in training programs anywhere from, I don't know, 5 to 20 years ago. I'll let them share with you kind of what their background is, but I want to let you know that this is being recorded, and we have a lot of people who are very interested in this topic. As always, we've spent so much of our time in academia, and it seems like industry is a whole nother world. And what is it like, and how do you get in, and is it the right place for me? So we have some good questions that we're going to be asking our panelists today. You're welcome to put some questions in the chat, and we'll also try to get to those as well. So I'm going to let our panelists introduce themselves and give you maybe about a 3-minute background of what they were doing when they were in Houston and what they're doing now. So let's start with you, Lauren. We'll start alphabetically. So you take it away.
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you to those of you who have joined today. I think this will be a really fun session. My fellow panelists and I are really looking forward to interacting with you all. My background, I was 15 or 20 years ago, I think now, Karen, one of the pharmacoinformatics fellows at the GCC Tech group. It was a really fantastic experience while I was getting my PhD at Baylor College of Medicine. It allowed me to merge kind of molecular bench research with clinical research and pharmacoinformatics. I learned how to code, how to manage databases, et cetera. All of that, of course, is part and parcel with the work that many of us do in our professional lives. I was then faculty at Baylor College of Medicine for a number of years. I led the health and biomedical informatics groups there for the Cancer Center, Breast Center, and some of the other centers that were there at Baylor, at least at the time. Left academia, went to the nonprofit world for a few years, where I was on the executive leadership team of a global standards development organization for all things submission to FDA, PMDA, and other medicines agencies worldwide. And then joined industry. Most recently, I think my title was VP, Head of Real World Evidence, Business Operations and Strategy, some component of that at Pfizer. Was there for 6 years. So happy to take questions. I know we have some topics that we'll cover, but again, it's a real pleasure to be here today.
Thank you, Lauren. I think I remember that you were in more of a biological field, and then you became what you call a card-carrying computer scientist. Is that right?
That's correct. You remember David Steffen's things very well. I went to the dark side of programming for sure and had a lot of fun doing so.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the takeaway from that is that Lauren came in thinking she was one thing, and due to the training, which was multidisciplinary, she turned into a different kind of scientist. Yeah. Okay. So, Ankur, how about you?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks, Karen, for inviting me to share my thoughts at this panel. As Lauren said, I'm excited to be here, as well as I hope this is going to be a fun and informative session for everyone. I did my PhD at Stanford University, and after finishing my PhD, I joined the program. So I was the computational cancer biology training program, which was under the auspices of CPRIT. I was doing a project which was a collaborative project between Rice University and MD Anderson Cancer Center. So it gave me an immense opportunity to not just be in traditional academia, but also at MD Anderson Center, where they were trying to actually develop drugs. So it gave me a very nice, training that helped me when I went to my next job, which was in industry. And it was actually at a company called Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. At the time I joined the company, it was a small company, but now it's a pretty substantial company. I stayed there for around 9 years, and then joined another company called Gritstone Bio, where I was senior vice president, leading bioinformatics, data science, and technology development groups. That company ceased operations at the end of last year. So I have many thoughts to share on that if you guys are curious about it. I took a little break and now exploring new opportunities, which also includes maybe starting my own company. So I might have some bits to share from that as well. So yeah, looking forward to this session.
Thanks, Ankur. All right, Madeline, you're next.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. So I did my PhD at University of Texas Health Science Center, Houston. I was in the neuroscience program and was doing a lot of cryo-EM. And so then through that, I was a part of the HAM-B training program and did a postdoc also at UT Health Science Center in the Department of Pathology, focusing on cryo-EM as well. And then did a little bit of a switch and went over to Baylor for a postdoc in the neurosurgery department. And then leveraged a disease model that I worked on there, which was in the ocular space, with some life challenges that came up that I'm sure I can get into later. Ended up moving into the world of contract research. And so I've been doing that for the past 4 years. And my current position is Chief Scientific Officer for our bioanalytical division here. So mostly focusing on bioanalysis for PK studies, clinical trials, and so on. And so.
And so by contract research, you mean that your organization contracts with pharmaceutical companies, or they contract with you to do part of the studies for clinical trials, or
Yeah, all the way through. So our organization does early chemistry synthesis, all the way through early PK discovery biology, and then through sample analysis for clinical trials as well. So contract work for anyone that is willing to hire scientists, ultimately.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, David.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Karen, and everyone else at GCC for inviting me to speak today. Yeah, I look forward to the discussion today. So my my PhD work started in '04 out to 2012, and I studied there at Baylor College of Medicine. I was in a program which I don't think currently exists in its original form. It used to be called Structural and Computational Biology and Molecular Biophysics, and I think now it has morphed into other sort of like quantitative and computational sciences programs there at Baylor. Um, I really enjoyed my time there. I joined that program having zero biology experience or background. And I really, my background was more so in pure and applied mathematics and computer science. And so the program at that time was really interested in hiring people that had either only a quantitative background or some mixture of quantitative sciences and different biology backgrounds. And so I joined that program and really just tried to soak in as much science as I could in my time there. I ended up joining a lab, which was more of a classical biochemistry, cell biology lab, and really just got trained more so in a foundational classical biochemistry, which I really loved, and which I to this day find just absolutely critical, just the foundational science that I learned at that time, and it was during that time that I became associated with HAM-BP. And from that point on, after completing my PhD work, I moved on to the University of Washington to do 2 postdocs there in the UW School of Pharmacy, both in their medicinal chemistry department. And we can discuss this more later on and during the meeting. But part of what I enjoyed about that department and that program is they had really long-standing ties with industry groups, and I had opportunities to network and engage with other industry partners. From that point on, I was able to leverage the projects that I was doing there, as well as my relationships with industry partners, to then segue into an industry role. So I moved into a smaller biotech company, which at the time was called Seattle Genetics. And then we were acquired a year ago by Pfizer. So now currently working with Pfizer. My total time in the industry is so far about 8 years. I have a role where I've been able to really kind of leverage the various backgrounds that I acquired starting in the Houston Medical Center, where I lead a small group which does a couple of different activities. We do some early in vitro screening tests that we developed within our team, which we then use as a predictive role for assessing the developability of certain therapeutics. We also do some more kind of biophysical kinetic assessments that we also developed within our team that we then work hand in hand with our computational and modeling scientists who then inform the types of models that they develop. Also in early discovery and the models that then carry on into the clinic. And lastly, myself and another person in our group, we also serve as what we call like a project lead where we represent our department from the kind of pharmacokinetics and drug metabolism perspectives on different teams for which there's a team for each drug as it's moving from early discovery up to the clinic, and we'll represent our respective departments on those teams.
Great. Thank you guys so much for that introduction. So, so I guess the first question I want to ask you is, when you were in training, when you were like where many of the participants in this session are today, they're mostly, I assume, graduate students and postdocs. So when you were at that level, what did you think you wanted to be, and how has that changed, and how did you pivot from one idea of being of a career to where you are now? David, why don't you go ahead, and we'll go back the way we came.
Yeah, thank you for starting with me. I love this question because yes, I feel like I did a complete 180 on my perspective from those days to where I landed. So starting in my undergrad years, all the way, well, starting my undergrad years, I was math major, and I always wanted to teach. So my intention was to teach high school math. I then pivoted after college, took on a job in the industry working in computer science, went back to graduate school. Then once I was in graduate school, I wanted to stay in academia. My goal was to stay in academia, teach, run a lab, and I loved every aspect of that, of the freedom to operate and the type of science that I would work in. I loved working training, mentoring new students. Um, However, yeah, I would say by the time I was in after 8 years of grad school, my fourth year of postdocing, at this point, my life had changed, and I was married. I had a kid on the way, and I think the concern about, and I believe at the time also that, as is now, achieving funding was always a challenge, and opportunities came up where I knew that I would have interactions with industry. I also had projects which were beginning to be a bit more aligned with industry interests. Then I went ahead and gave it a shot, and I took a job. And now, honestly, I don't know why I didn't consider it sooner. At least for me personally, it was a good fit. It's not a good fit for everyone. And for me personally, I really enjoy what I do. I love the type of work that we do, the way that we operate, just collaboratively. I love everything about it. So, yeah, it was a big shift for me, but I'm glad. I'm really happy with the direction I went in.
Oh, Madeline?
So I have a fairly similar story. I think once I was in graduate school and in postdocs, I always sort of envisioned that I would stay in academia. I really had this desire to run a small to medium-sized lab and to be able to, make those decisions about what direction you're going to go scientifically and have that opportunity to really mentor and train individuals. That's something I've always really resonated with. And it was just like life circumstances. So it was the pandemic. I'd been in different postdoc positions for about 5 years. And then my husband was laid off in the pandemic. We all went through it. It was a really hard time. He was an engineer. And so we stayed in Houston for about a year after that. And he was looking for work. And ultimately, I have family in Michigan. And we were able to, through a connection, to get him a job at Pfizer in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And so then, funny enough, it just happens to be sort of a small hotspot for contract research. There are some other large companies you guys might be familiar with that are here. And then through my experience as a postdoc, I started working in this optic nerve crush model of injury, which is useful for ocular disease, but also in neuroscience. And there was a contract research group here that has a big ocular focus. And that's currently where I still am. So it just sort of aligned. And I took the opportunity just to see if I liked it. I was like, I will take the risk. So I took a senior scientist role in the large molecule bioanalysis group. So it's mostly ELISA work, ECL-based ELISAs with like mesoscale discovery platform. Not work that I had specifically done in the past, but I've worked many times with antibodies. Most of us are very familiar with antibody work. So translated well, and I just had a skill set that translated well. And then being here over time, I just sort of grew through the ranks and took on more responsibility. But I think in the end, what happened was the site that I lead here is about 20 people. So it's that medium-sized lab. I get to make decisions about what services we do, what our scientific direction is. We take, requests from clients and we have to translate that into practical, meaningful work. So it very much feels like academia while not being in academia. And every place has its issue, right? You might be worried about funding in a lab, but here we're worried about incoming work. So it's different, but it feels very similar. And I'm quite happy. So I'll leave it at that.
So Madeline, so we had a question. Could you give us the name of your company so that people can look it up on the website? Because I think a lot of people are familiar with the big pharma names, but maybe not so much the contract research.
Yeah, smaller. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm at Pharma, and if you can look me up on LinkedIn too, and that will have the locations and everything for spelling. Pharma, we're fairly small, so we're about 20 people. We do large and small molecule bioanalysis, and we do have a vivarium that works with rodents and rabbits. We're a part of a larger organization, Genesis Drug Discovery and Development, that has a footprint in the US and in Budapest. And so we can do chemistry, tox work, and so on. So
that's great. And just so everyone knows, I was actually with a contract research organization before I joined GCC, but our group focused on clinical trials. So there's various types of research organizations all over the world. Some of them are international, some of them are more local. One I worked for was actually in Houston. It was a small boutique, but it had international work. Anyway, okay, so let's move on to Ankur.
Yeah, I mean, very similar answer in my case as well. So when I was in academia, especially when I was doing my postdoc, at that point when I was beginning my postdoc, in the beginning of my postdoc, I did not think that I will go into industry. And as I was going through 1 or 2 or 3 years, I mean, obviously, I also had this fear that in industry there is no serious research, and I had a very strong liking for research. So when it was time, in the sense that I was coming towards the end of my postdoctoral fellowship, I started looking for everything. So I was looking at positions in academia, I was looking for positions in industry, and then nothing was really exciting. But then I found this position at Regeneron, which was starting their fellowship program. So I basically thought, okay, this is a fellowship program. I'll go and interview with them and let's see what happens. So I went there, I interviewed with them, and that was one of the best, experience I had in terms of when I gave the presentation, the kind of questions I got, the real focus on science everybody had there. And I said, okay, I can see how I can fit in this kind of environment. And that's basically it. Like I got an offer, I joined the company, and then I never looked back. So I mean, yeah, I think it was one of the best decisions of my life. I really enjoy in industry the aspect of really helping with drug discovery, really having a practical application to all the work that you do. And I mean, that's nothing to say against like people who are doing basic science. And obviously there are people doing basic science in industry as well. But I personally, especially like, being in a computational field, really enjoy doing computation that moves drug discovery forward. So yeah, it's been a great experience, and I do not regret like leaving academia, which was also great, by the way, but I don't regret it.
So you got your foot in the door by just accepting a fellowship.
Yes,
A
yes.
temporary fellowship to work in.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, so that's a great entry then into.
Yeah, especially for people.
Yeah.
Especially for people who are not sure whether they want to stay in academia or go into industry, because typically the industry fellowships allow you to publish. So because if you are doing a regular job, then sometimes the publication timelines are very stretched out. You don't get to publish, like you do a work and then you get a publication out of it 10 years down the road. But whereas a fellowship typically has a publication requirement for you to have a successful fellowship. So that could be one way, trainees can think of getting a foot through the door of the industry.
Okay. All right, so let's go on to Lauren. First of all, I know we're getting some questions in there. I promise you, we're going to we have about 10 questions, and we're going to hit a lot of the things that you're putting in the chat right now. So just give us a little time. If we don't get to your question, I'm pretty sure we will, but we will certainly make a point to get to your question. Okay, go ahead, Lauren.
So again, just as everyone else has said, many of the panelists, we all have very similar experiences. I suspect that we would all say that we also were very curious, that all of us were interested. I think, Karen, you mentioned interdisciplinary work. Certainly that was where my heart was. I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do for my career. I think like Ankur, there were a number of things that I found interesting, whether it was in nonprofit space, government space, for-profit, whatever the case is. I just wanted to keep myself open to those opportunities. But absolutely, I knew that I wanted to be at the nexus between healthcare delivery and research to be able to use my skills at the bench, those that were portable, and port them over into something that would have a direct business opportunity. And by that, I mean, be something that had a measurable impact for patients or providers or, whoever the others might be. In pharma, we tend to think of like the 3 Ps, so providers, patients, and payers. But there are many other individuals and groups that can benefit from the work that we all do. So really, it was just kind of keeping that sense of curiosity open and being, I guess, very active and looking for engagements and opportunities to build my network and to satisfy scientific curiosity as well as building some business skills. I think, Karen, it might be kind of useful. Like, I find myself sometimes just making assumptions about people's knowledge. I would guess most of the folks on this call understand R&D, especially early R&D, really well from a pharma perspective. You'll hear lots of other abbreviations, gang, as we go through this. CRO, ARO, we love alphabet soup. It only gets worse when you get into industry coming from academia, especially if you're in biomedicine, unfortunately. So please do stop us if we use alphabet soup, but in addition to kind of that discovery set, there's an entire life cycle in pharma and biotech and in ancillary industries supporting them. So, as you kind of move from that discovery space where you're getting into a phase 1 unit, you start looking at safety, you start looking at efficacy, larger and larger trials. We are all familiar with this. There are groups within industry that can decide whether they want to outsource to a contract research organization, or maybe they insource and they're managing the machinery around all of the tech for their trials, all the site management, all the risk-based monitoring and things that you have to have the right data, you've got to have the right algorithms and technology to do these things efficiently. From that clinical trial space, then you might have approvals, hopefully, by global regulators, where then you get involved another group of people that are really deep experts on industry regulation and how to put together a successful evidentiary package. After that, you get into kind of a medical space where you might have physicians prescribing early medicines and other therapeutics. After something is approved, then you start thinking about payers. These might be insurers, they might be federal governments globally. Boy, that can get really complicated. There's a whole host of people that think about market access, health economics and outcomes research, who think about commercialization and marketing a product. So it's a whole host of different types of careers that you might find yourself interested in. So I would say probably my fellow panelists and I would be happy to answer questions that you might have about those jobs, that they're not necessarily things that we do. Or any other career that's kind of in that general realm, because there are dozens of them hiding under the hood. Sorry for being long-winded, Karen.
Thank you. Thanks, Lauren. Okay, so I want to ask right now, what are some of the skills that that some of our participants could be developing now that are going to be totally attractive to careers and industry? What are some of the things that they can be preparing themselves for, skill development? So some of this we talked about earlier is like, for example, we're doing a lot of things with AI and machine learning. Do these trainees, do they need to have that kind of a background? Is that going to make them more attractive to an industry? So let's go to Madeline. Start with Madeline.
I had a feeling it was going to be me for this one. So I don't know that I have the best answer, but I have an answer. I think besides specific scientific experience. That's going to help you get in the door. I really think it's all of the other skills that are going to be almost more helpful, not necessarily for getting the job, but once you get a job, that's how you're going to do really well, how you're going to continue to progress. So it's, you know, knowing how to communicate, how to mentor and train, you know, your coworkers. It's how you engage with people. So specifically with AI, I do think it's useful to have enough of an understanding. It's not anything that I have a ton of experience with, but it's like continuously being brought up as how can we improve operations or be more effective at what we do by using AI. And so I think if you have enough familiarity with it, that you're not scared, or that you're willing to experiment with it and figure out, like, for example, we had a conversation today internally about, so when a client comes to us for a project, we write up quotations for that work, you know, including study design and cost, and there's tables. And so we're looking at whether or not we can use AI to put in our SOPs, our AUP, you know, our protocols for how we operate, our budgets, and the way we typically price things out, and automate this more so that we can save time. So I think there's plenty of examples like that where it's a tool that you can use. And so as long as you're comfortable, and then if you're beyond comfortable, that's even more of a benefit. But I think that's really important. It's like, you might have the scientific skills to get the job, but it's going to be all of those other things that we're constantly talking about, those like soft skills with getting your PhD and doing additional training with your postdoc that are going to help. So that's my bit of insight there.
So, along with those lines, and anyone who of the other three panelists who want to, you know, respond, you know, please feel free and to do so. But along that line, is there anything that you think in particular will make you stand out, put your resume at the top of the pile instead of just being one of hundreds of resumes? So when you think about,
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
No, go ahead, Madeline. I think Madeline wants to say something.
So I mean, we're hiring right now, and so that is something that I'm thinking about. Funny enough, the biggest thing that's going to get some, at least where we are, the thing that's going to get the most attention is having industry experience, unfortunately. So it's getting your foot in the door, getting some experience. But that said, like, your resume, your CV needs to be clean. You need to communicate well. You need to, you know, not need to. These are the things we look for. If you're going to write a cover letter, you know, make it meaningful, communicate what your skills are, what you're looking for. Again, those are the things that are highlighting the soft skills that you have. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like, you know, I want to give two perspectives, one from a point of view, one for like computational scientists and another for like, you know, people who are not computational scientists. So as you mentioned, Karen, for computational scientists, right now, it is very important that they, you know, even if they are not doing research in AI or machine learning, that they are very familiar with what is going on in that particular field, especially connected to the field that they are in. So for example, if somebody is working on protein structures and they are doing something that is not AI or machine learning related, but you know that there has been like now an outburst of several AI tools like AlphaFold, ESMFold, and you know, protein MPNN and things like that. So there are several tools, and people who are in this field probably know what I'm talking about. So it's very important that even if you are not really, you know, doing research on those kind of tools, but you are very, very intimately familiar with what those tools are, what their applications are, what their limitations are. Because these are the kind of things I think in industry are very important as compared to academia, because people want to hire people who have depth in certain fields, but they're also looking for breadth, because it's very important in industry to have a wide range of, you know, sort of knowledge base, so that you can talk to different stakeholders, which is very important. And you will see that also in interview panels. You know, if you are a computational scientist, you will have on your panels people who are not computational scientists. And then if you want to communicate to them, you have to have those kind of skills where you can not only talk about your field to the experts in that particular field, but also to the non-experts. So I think from my point of view, for computational scientists, AI, machine learning skills, and familiarity of the latest that is going on in that particular field, the pros and cons of different tools, learning that is very important. Ability to explain those things to somebody who is a non-expert, that's very important. And again, same goes for scientists or trainees who are non-computational, because even for them that familiarity with what is going on in their space is always going to make them stand out, as opposed to somebody who is just doing bench work and knows nothing about anything else. So yeah, I think it's very important.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Ankur just said. When I started at Pfizer, we have a lot of Pfizer or Pfizer adjacent people on the call today, interestingly enough. When I started there, I was N of one, kind of, individual contributor, grew a group of over 200 people with folks sitting in almost every country in the world. So I can tell you, having led that team and built that team up, what Ankur just said about being able to explain what it is that you're doing, what your passion is to someone who has no background whatsoever and might not care about what you're having to say or what you're trying to do. Being able to get that across succinctly in a way that they can understand is absolutely a massive differentiator between folks that will be recognized as being technical experts versus those that will have considerable vertical growth over time. I think it's kind of embedded in some of what we've heard already, but just executive leadership skills, I would say in general, that includes networking, also situational leadership. You're not always going to be in charge. You're going to have to make people want to follow you, to make people see what your vision is, and then want to participate in that vision and make sure that it happens. And then I would say the business of science. Whether you're becoming a veterinarian, a medical doctor, whether you're getting your PhD and you're, going to become a scientist, whatever the case is, we all have to now rely on data-driven decision-making to help make the right choices. We have to think about not only is this scientifically exciting, is this, scratching our curiosity and our itch there, but is this going to help the bottom line? And that bottom line, most importantly, would be anchored to an actual person, whether it's a patient or, some other business vertical. We don't tend to spend a lot of time thinking about project management, product management, those sorts of things. Those skills can be enormously helpful. And then, like my fellow panelists have said, if you're looking to get into this space right now, unfortunately, people will be looking for you to do the thing that is already described, to have that expertise as opposed to getting a toe in. Some companies tend to kind of be looking more towards developing talent that's newer, that they would train up and kind of teach to, become the expert. But by and large, I think a lot of folks, unfortunately, are looking for someone who can come in day one and hit the ground running. So look for different opportunities, whether they're fellowship programs, whether they're summer, they might call them a number of different things, but kind of, summer research programs, whatever those opportunities are, get involved in professional organizations. There are a lot of interdisciplinary kind of, across different verticals, whether it's something like HIMSS, if you're kind of more towards the healthcare end of the spectrum. It might be ISPOR, ISPE, if you're into outcomes research at all, and there are many others. That's a way for you to get to know folks in the industry, to have your name get out there and to start building your network. And I cannot stress this enough. My junior people never did this enough, in my opinion. Network, network, network. It's so often not what you know, but who you know. That may not be fair, but it is the way that the world works. So the more people that you have on your LinkedIn profile, the more that you're going out and meeting at industry events, or scientific events, certainly, I think the better.
Yeah, if I can add a couple of perspectives to that. So first, yeah, I totally agree with what everyone's saying. This is great. So I want to just give a quick anecdote and then then speak more broadly about my overall perspective behind some of these things. And I was remembering back when I was a postdoc, and in Seattle, there was a local location of the company Amgen, which is no longer there. And a lot of folks in our department would go on tours. And so I did a tour, I got to meet with some of the executive team, and I met with one of the lab heads, and we all had the same question. What technical skills should we have? What are you hiring for? What are you focused on? And he just kind of laughed and he said, well, do you know how to do an ELISA? And it was the last thing I thought he was going to say. And I said, no, actually, no, no, I know what you're talking about. I've never done it. I was doing like single molecule fluorescence experiments and these like boutique type technical instruments. And so what I was going to say is two things. One of them, once I came into industry, it was eye-opening to see the types of technical expertise that is more so the bread and butter across different departments, and it's going to vary from department to department. But the other thing I was going to say is kind of in line with what Madeline was saying earlier, that it's as a hiring manager, which I've been for years. Yes, there is somewhat of a focus on the technical expertise, but there's a pretty large focus on what we call soft skills, right? And so I think some of the things that I look at in the person's CV and that I follow up on during the interview is I want to find out how good are they at collaborating, right? So I ask them, okay, I see this project. I see that you worked with folks from other universities. What did that look like? Who led the meetings? Like, what were the logistics behind this? And I understand, I learned pretty quickly like how much initiative they took and how did they lead these meetings. And it's pretty clear if they have multiple papers with multiple universities, and that's something I usually take note of. But also, just as importantly, one of the things you're going to be doing in industry all the time is communicating in many different ways, right? And so I think some of the things that we have to do, and I try to pay attention to, is, and as somebody was speaking to this earlier, but how well can you encapsulate what you're trying to convey, but then on a dime, be able to pivot and convert that message into many different forms. So either you have something that you're working on and you need to speak cross-functionally to folks who are at your level, but who work in another department and have a completely different background, and they just need to know the bare essentials of what's most important without diving into the weeds. You may need to then speak to your team of direct reports, the same message, but now like at much more depth, and try to be able to sort out the logistics of what they need to do, sooner than later. And then you'll go to the next meeting, and then you need to then communicate that same message up to leadership, but now in this like highly distilled, condensed form that just tells them what they need to know. And so like, and I feel like training that I obtained during grad school, or PhD, and delivering presentations, I feel like all of that was incredibly helpful in sort of helping to organize those thoughts. But it's something that you continue to refine during your career, and it doesn't stop once you get the job. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's mainly what I wanted to get across. Thanks.
Okay, gosh, you guys have given such wonderful, insightful responses to these. I mean, I can tell already this has been very, very helpful. So, but one of the things that has come through is, okay, resume or CV, and if it's a resume, what would you highlight? What would be the one thing that you would highlight about your experience that a hiring manager would pick up on and, maybe contact you about coming in? Is there anything you could think of that? And don't forget, would you rather see a resume or a CV?
I'll go first. I would rather see a resume. Please don't give me a 50-page CV to read through. Like, it's a lot. Someone I think in chat says that they heard a lot about industry positions getting 2,000 applicants per opening. It's even working with a talent acquisition partner, if you're at a company that's large enough to have a colleague like that, if you're lucky enough to be in that case, you're still looking through dozens, if not hundreds of resumes. People are probably going to give you 2, maybe 3 pages. That's it. They're not going to look at it beyond that. There may be some cases, and I certainly leave it to colleagues on the line who are maybe in earlier discovery settings where that's different. But what I can tell you certainly from phase 2 onwards in pharma, brevity will be king. Have a little header statement where you can, summarize what is it exactly that you want us to take away from 50 bullets that you've got, however many pages that you've got, to where you feel like these are the skills that you think are most directly applicable to the job that you were posting under. But I would just encourage people, I know we have the structure in academia, our CVs to sometimes be dozens and dozens of pages long and have an absolutely exhaustive set of papers and things in a bibliography. That is typically not looked upon as favorably in industry.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else? Panel?
Yeah, Madeline, go ahead.
Oh, you
raised
can
your
go
hand
ahead.
first. Yeah, I mean, I will also go along with Lauren's thoughts here. Like, resume is what I like as well. The one little bit of advice that I will add is that please read the job descriptions very carefully, and make sure that in your resume, you're addressing how your profile can address the job responsibilities as well as the qualifications that are mentioned on the job description. That's very important. I think if you just have like a generic resume or a CV that lists all your accomplishments, but maybe 50% of them are not relevant to the job, then you are just wasting hiring managers' time. So make sure that it's not like you have to add like 100 different experiences there. Maybe you have 5 or 6 experience, but they are super relevant to the job that is posted. And that's what I think makes it stand out. So try to put yourself in hiring manager's shoes, and try to see your resume through that lens. Like, okay, if I were the hiring manager, would I like my resume, right? So I think that's something that I have done throughout my career. And that's something that always helps you is looking at your own resume through that lens. I would also add that nowadays with Chat GPT and other tools, you can very easily, and many people have been are doing this. I'm talking to other people in my network. You can use the assistance of Chat GPT to tailor your resume so that it can, refine your experiences or rephrase your experiences so that that better fits the job description, right? So it's not creating lies, but it's just like writing it in such a way that it gels more with what is being asked for in terms of the responsibilities and qualifications for that job. So feel free to do that. I think that's going to be helpful. I have known people who have had success with that, especially like if there is some kind of automated system that is pre-filtering your resumes before they even hit the hiring manager or the talent acquisition person. I think it's very important. So yeah, those are like a little bit of extra information from my side.
Yeah, so I think that everything that you guys have mentioned so far is really, really relevant and important. And I'll just add, so I think when I look at a CV or a resume, and I do prefer brevity personally, I think it's easier, being able to find the relevant skill set quickly is really helpful. But then with respect to if you have other skills that you want the employer to know, having a section of other relevant skills or techniques and things, and then having a section where you list those things, because you don't necessarily know what people are looking for. You do know according to the job description, but there might be this other nuance where, if we can hire someone that can do this technique, but maybe they could also advise us on this other, it's beneficial to have that there. But then also I really think like the cleanliness of it. Are you using the same font? Are your sizes consistent? Are your, is everything aligned properly? Those things, even if people don't know that they're looking for them, it really comes across the page, I think, for certain people. So just being clean cut with those things, and making sure you're really highlighting the relevant experience. I think that's helpful.
Yeah, if I could just kind of re-emphasize a few things that were said, I totally agree with everything. But yeah, this idea of kind of tailoring the resume to that specific job posting, I think hiring managers can see right away if someone is kind of applying to dozens of jobs with the exact same resume every time. It's very clear. And I think like, as Ankur was saying, like the hiring manager just only has so much time kind of in between meetings or at the end of the day to sort of like very quickly peruse some of these things that have been passed on to them. And then to repeat something that Madeline was saying, the resume at first is really just the hiring manager's first glance at it's, you really want to put your best foot forward. And if it's, these are small things, but if it's cluttered, if there's misspellings, various other things, just it at some level, it could suggest something to the hiring manager, but whereas if it's just everything's perfect, I think that also, a lot of these hiring managers are looking for perfectionists at a certain level, right? And so I think that's all very important. One thing I was going to add though is that in some resumes can be kind of a listing of, bullets of accomplishments, this paper, this journal, and I think, or, thesis defense title. Sometimes I've seen cases where if there's enough room on the resume, just a very small blurb, one line of what was the main takeaway of what you did, and the hiring manager gets like the first glimpse of how you're communicating, what was 4, 5, 6 years of work, what, did you now establish a model that is now the standard in your field? You know, like something that helps them understand the significance of the work that you've done, but also just to understand your communication skills up front. But that's all I wanted to add.
All right, thank you guys so much. So just a couple of questions about hiring. One is, and this could be a very quick answer. Is there a hiring season like there is in academia, or is it just rolling? Can you just apply anytime you want to? David?
I guess having been in two different companies, I would say yes and no. I had been in situations where, depending on the calendar year, depending on the budget cycle, there would be sometimes there would be months where a lot of positions would open all of a sudden, and we would recommend to folks coming out of academia, like, always pay attention to the job postings, but definitely at this month. But I think most often what I see is it really just depends on the department, and when funding becomes available, things just have to align. And so I would just recommend everyone to just keep an eye on job postings as much as possible.
Any other panelists want to add to that?
I mean, in my opinion, there is, yeah, I mean, it's not completely that there is a season where there is no hiring, but there are definitely slow months and months that are not slow. So typically, like summer and November, December, January are typically, I think, in my opinion, are considered slow months because typically, especially if you have like a cross-disciplinary interview panel, people are traveling, they are on vacation, so they are not able to find the whole interview team together, and that just slows things down. So other than that, I don't think that there is, really a season, but there is definitely periods when it's slow versus fast.
Okay, now what about if you're an international person? Are there any barriers to that?
I mean, I can speak to that because when I was applying for positions, I definitely required a work visa. So if you are looking for very early stage startups, I don't think that you will have much success because typically those companies don't have a lot of budget to really hire an immigration person to figure out how to apply for your visa or how to apply for visa on your behalf. But if it is a big company, so I went to Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. I got a work visa through them. And for big companies, there is never any problem. I mean, they are looking to hire the best talent and they are always happy to sponsor visas. And then, yeah, other than very early stage startups, I think even Gritstone Bio, which was a smaller company compared to Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, we were hiring people on visas all the time. So yeah, so it's just sometimes those early stage startup jobs might be difficult for you to, apply to.
What about, you recommend cover letters or no cover letters? Which way? Anybody?
I personally am a fan. I would say that we probably don't get 2,000 applications for every position. Part of that is being in Michigan. I think it's different depending on where you are regionally and other factors. But if there's a cover letter, I always do, if it's a resume that I'm already interested in, I will read the cover letter. And I think that it gives you a good idea of how they communicate, what their background is, like what they're looking for, what their goals are. So I think that they're typically very useful, but that is my opinion.
I would agree with your opinion. I think, gang, again, just remember that you've got hiring managers that are doing this nights and weekends. So a page at most, keep it clean, and use that to not revisit the bullet points that are in your resume or your CV. People can read those. They already have read them. If they're coming to your cover letter, it means that something in your resume sparked their interest. That's your opportunity to tell a brief story. So who are you as an individual? What specifically, maybe it cuts across 10 different bullet points in your resume, but there's some narrative that you can synthesize from this that might make you an even more attractive candidate. I think to me, that's the most compelling cover letters that I have read tend to kind of follow along those lines, if that helps.
Okay, yeah, another question. Do we need to do a postdoc before we go into industry, or can we go right from getting our PhD and moving into industry? Is there a preference?
I think it depends on what you're doing. Again, I'll leave kind of early R&D discovery to other colleagues here. If you're in a commercial space, kind of more medical commercial, it's possible for you to go into industry at a more junior position, of course, but to not necessarily go in with a postdoc. Some people go and they do their postdocs within industry to get that kind of bridging experience. But my guess is, and again, I'm kind of maybe looking more at like Madeline, David, Ankur here, that if you're earlier in the pipeline space, that it would be more difficult to get a more senior position and even like middle tier position without having a postdoc. But again, maybe colleagues like put me out of my misery if I'm completely there.
I can chime in for a little bit. And I do think that contract research is different. We tend to, honestly, a PhD is helpful, but really what we're looking for is specific skills and techniques to run these studies. That said, having the advanced degree and having the postdoc makes it more likely that you would quickly step in as a senior scientist or even work up to a group lead and then move from there. So with that experience under your belt, you would be leading a team, you're, communicating with clients and discussing the science to make sure that the study designs that we're putting together are meeting the needs of the client. So it's like having the technical experience, but then having all of that additional training is where you, it's like the soft skills that I kind of mentioned there. And so I just wanted to comment on that with Justin asked a question about mentoring. And I think it's related to that. So I think, individuals that we hire with advanced degrees and postdoctoral training are more likely to step in and start mentoring and training other people. And so, yes, that is a big part of what I do, whether it's scientific or operations. There's a lot of that. And I think that's what really resonates about what I do right now. So just briefly, yeah.
Yeah, I can add to that in that so yes, I work more sort of like the preclinical, like early discovery side. And we certainly hire folks with either PhDs or that have gone into a postdoc. I think that we don't necessarily discriminate between the two, like it's a hard line of one or the other. I think it more so just, it depends on the individual. And so we're probably looking just a little bit more closely at their experience. If we're looking for someone to come in and immediately lead a team, we want to be able to see that they've had some leadership. And if there's like specific skills that we are looking for in some cases, and they only pick them up in their postdoc, then that happens to help. But we occasionally have folks who come in straight from PhD who have all the right skills we're looking for and sort of demonstrated the ability to collaborate and and they seem to communicate very well, and they just seem ready to go. And so it kind of just depends on their training.
Yeah, I think I'll agree with all of you here. I will add a little bit more information. So for the computational scientists or the computational trainees, usually it is okay to not have a postdoc. I think the industry is very open to hiring computational scientists right out of PhD, especially if you have done PhD in an area which is directly relevant to that particular position. Also, I think some of the companies which are early stage startups, or even companies which have gone through one or two rounds of funding, they are very open to take chances on people who haven't done a postdoc, because in some ways you are also taking a chance on them, right? So you are not sure whether they'll be successful. They are also willing to take that risk. So those kind of positions could be open to people who without a postdoc. But typically what I've seen is, bigger companies, especially I can talk about my region on experience, at least for the bench positions, they were specifically looking for people with a postdoc, unless it is somebody who has done a star PhD, person who is applying. So yeah, it also depends on what size of industry you are applying to, and what stage they are in.
So if someone is graduating with a PhD, sometime the next year, and they think they want to do a postdoc, and they would have a choice between an industry postdoc and an academic postdoc, what's the difference? And if you want to go into, does it make a difference? And if you go into an industry postdoc, will that help you get a job in industry? That's kind of a long
Yeah, I mean,
part
I
question.
can give a little bit on that. So Regeneron Pharma. So I did a postdoc at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals that definitely got me inside the industry, and then I transitioned. I did a quick postdoc and then transitioned to a full time permanent position very quickly. I also know about some other postdocs, like Genentech has a very famous postdoc program, and I know that they typically don't like to hire their own postdocs, but that program is so prestigious that using that experience, you can get an industry job somewhere else. So I think having that industry experience, especially if you are targeting industry positions as your career, and you are very clear about that, if you have an offer to do an industry postdoc, then I think you should go for it as compared to the academic postdoc for sure.
Yeah, if I can just add, like I think if you already inclined to go into industry and you have the opportunity to do an industry postdoc, I would recommend it. I think it's going to be a little bit different from doing academic postdoc, but I think some of the differences, at least in in having mentored industry postdocs in the past, a few differences are, depending on the department, instead of doing a project completely on your own, you might have access to resources within the department, within the company, and so you may have this kind of breadth to your project that you may not have had otherwise. Oftentimes there is a lot of emphasis on that there can be a very clearly defined start and end date because that postdoc has been funded for a very discrete period, and there may be a really strong emphasis on publishing towards the end of it. And so there will be not just one, but likely multiple mentors helping you design and execute a project, and not just helping. I mean, you're doing it yourself, but at least giving you some input on trying to have a really well defined pathway towards reaching publication. But I think also just as importantly, it's a chance to network, it's a chance to meet people, it's a chance to get an idea of how drug discovery works from like the other side, from having an understanding of how industry really operates. But also, as Ankur was mentioning, a lot of companies don't necessarily hire their postdocs, and I think what in our case back when I was at CGen, we would just kind of say up front, like, there's no guarantee that you're going to be hired on. Like, this is all sort of defined by funding, but we want you to have the best experience that you're going to have. But some companies will hire on from that point on. But if you're at a company like that that is open to hiring, the postdoc in itself, the hiring managers sort of look at it as a really long interview, right? And by the end, if you've really just demonstrated that you have to be there, and they really need, like, they will do what they can to sort of move funding around and sort of try to make things happen. That can happen. That doesn't necessarily mean that will happen, but it just depends on the department and the budget that they're working with and your experience there.
Yeah. Okay, just quickly, I want to add this, and I think we're going to move on to just what the cultural work-life balance is. And if you've got the job, is it really suiting your own personal needs at the time? But first of all, I want to say this is being recorded. We will send a link to this recording to all of the participants. Our panelists have graciously allowed us to share their email addresses. You may follow up with them individually or as a group and ask questions if we don't get around to your questions today. We only have about 30 more minutes for this, and there's some other areas we want to cover. All of these panelists have said, look, we were in this position ourselves 10, 20 years ago. Excuse me. We know what they're going through. There's a lot of, concern, maybe worry even. They are here to help you. And I'm just so appreciative of their time and their energy today, and they're just and their advice. So let's go on. Okay, let's talk about the culture of being in an industry position. I mean, how does it change from what about career growth? What about work-life balance? What about the stability and job security? Are there teaching opportunities? If you have a real knack for teaching, will you be able to do things like, is there flexibility? What about other kinds of benefits? That's a lot, but maybe we can sum it up with from each of you. You might as well start, David.
Yeah, I think I saw this question in the chat, and I thought it was a really good question. Yeah, I was saying I really do enjoy teaching, and You do, yes. I think you get kind of somewhat similar experiences. You know, you don't necessarily get a chance to work with a group of students day in and day out. But as a PhD, working in kind of like early discovery, that sort of space, um, you're constantly having to share your story or the story of your department or the story of your team, and doing that um, within in a smaller team environment or delivering presentations to a larger department. A lot of that all happens pretty often, at least within my particular company. And I will also note, when I first was recruited to the first company that I worked with, um, right after I was brought on, one of the first things they said to me was, "Oh, actually, it is important for us to in some cases have someone who may be the face of the department as new projects are rolling through, and seeing people's abilities to communicate is part of the hiring process, and partly for that reason. And so, yeah, I think yes, I do get the chance to be able to sort of educate folks in other departments on what we've done, but it's not quite the same as delivering a lecture in a classroom, which is very challenging. I did get a chance to do that when I was still a postdoc, and that is a lot of work, and I loved it. But yeah, it's a little bit different.
What about work-life balance? Are you
Yeah,
working
yeah,
40 hours a week or?
yeah. So yeah, I think it's something good to establish as you're going through the interview process. You certainly want to make sure you discuss that with the hiring manager, with other folks that you're interviewing with. Just have a good understanding of what the culture is like, what the expectations are. And when I hire folks, I try to be as transparent with them as possible, and that is, we really value work-life balance. We don't want anyone to burn out. We want to make sure that you're contributing your best as much as possible, and so that means taking vacations, enjoying your personal time to yourself. And we often encourage people to, if we notice they haven't been taking vacations, we will ask them to do so. Hey, why don't you just take a day off and do some work around the house or something like that? Just kind of as a joke, um, but I think it's important to establish that early on, and I think also that usually the company um, will try to establish that culture at a high level, where your executive team, your leadership, hopefully everyone is spreading a similar message that it's important to take good care of yourself.
What about promotions and, moving up into different divisions or within your own division? Are you stuck in a job for a while, or are there lots of opportunities?
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
I think that certainly really varies from company to company, department to department. I think at a smaller company, um, the rate of promotion, the positions that be promoted into can be very different from a much larger company. I think in smaller companies, there's uh, at least the one that I worked in, there was a tendency to sort of promote on a much faster frequency. Um, but and at some other companies, it may not occur as frequently necessarily, but the work, but you can still be compensated appropriately, and the work continues to be just as exciting. So I think it really just kind of it depends where you are, but so far I've had no concerns about sort of the rate at which these things happen.
One thing to add is that at many of the larger pharma companies, and I'd say you're kind of looking at on the kind of mid-cap to large pharma companies, many roles are highly specialized, and there are lots of different departments spread across research and business units all over these companies, which can be 40 to 90,000 people. So we're talking very large volume. Many of them are very interested in retaining top talent. Um, there is an industry number that says it will cost you 180% of whatever it is, your kind of all-in cost for salary and fringe for an employee to replace that employee. So many companies, when they have top talent, are looking to retain them and to give them new opportunities that may not be consistent vertical promotion. And so there are opportunities within companies to do something completely different. So, maybe you start at a position that's more at the bench, perhaps then you become interested in learning more about operations. Or maybe you want to learn more about, phase 3 trials, go into something that's on the commercial side to business development, whatever that case is. There are opportunities like that do come up, as well as some professional development opportunities. Like David was mentioning though, gang, your mileage will vary wildly. You're going to have to spend some time really looking into what is the corporate culture of any given company that you're looking at. Ask good questions when you're being interviewed. That's your time. As much as they're interviewing you, you're interviewing them. But also do some digging in advance to get a sense of, where does the company invest in its employees, and are those the kinds of things that will do your career good long term or not?
Yeah, I mean, on the question of work-life balance, again, I would like to emphasize that it can be very different based on the stage of the company you are in. So, I mean, I was at Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, which was a bigger company, and I felt like the work-life balance was a little bit better. When I was at Gritstone Bio, which was a smaller company, always fighting for its survival, it was not that great. But having said that, I found the job at Gritstone Bio more exciting, even though the work-life balance wasn't that great. Because as Lauren was mentioning, in a bigger company, the jobs are very specialized. You kind of tend to stay in your lane and basically work on something that you're really good at. Whereas in a smaller company, you wear many hats, you have many responsibilities, and that basically means that you are more involved in everything, and that obviously affects your work-life balance. So it's again like, you have to evaluate yourself as a person, and you just have to figure out like, if I find something exciting to do, how much I'm willing to, sacrifice work-life balance for it. And I think that's a choice that you have to make in your career. And hopefully you can evaluate that through the interview process. So, asking good questions to the hiring manager is always very important. And also not only the hiring manager, but the rest of the people in the team, because the hiring manager may not tell you the exact things, but you can sort of get this information from other team members who could be your future colleagues. So yeah, so that's my bit on work-life balance.
So I can speak a little bit for the contract research world. I think it very much mirrors what you all have said. And I think, independent of specific culture, different companies, I think for the most part, you're going to have less flexibility, but probably more stability with larger companies. Smaller companies, you're going to potentially have more flexibility. That's certainly the case here. But then in certain times, that might mean less of a work-life balance because the workload can be heavier at times.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say like the past year and a half or so, the landscape has been pretty hard in the industry for contract research, and there's been layoffs at really large companies and small companies. And it's sort of my opinion that whoever can make it through this is going to come out on the, in a good place when it sort of levels out. And I do think maybe smaller companies have a bit of an advantage there, since their operational costs are lower. But yeah, so I think that the stability also kind of is more indicative by the size of the company, though, for the most part. But that was a question in the chat that I wanted to get to. And then what was the other? Oh, it was back to the mentoring and teaching. So just a personal example that I have, since we have 3 separate sort of lines of service where I am, there's a lot of opportunity for people with a generalized understanding for those different departments to help communicate between them and then bridge those conversations with clients. And so it's not traditional teaching or mentoring, but there's a lot of, I'll meet with chemists and make sure that they understand what our in-life group is doing and what our technicians are doing. And then I'm speaking with the client and really helping bridging all of that communication. And that feels a lot like teaching and mentoring. So there's a nice aspect of that.
I'll just add one quick thing on the promotion stuff, because I think, promotions are very tricky overall, like they're very tricky. But I think what you have to do is figure out what kind of unique talent you bring to the company and how that is sort of in a unique manner helping the most important programs or the products in the company. as long as you are able to understand those two things, what is the uniqueness of your talent and how it is uniquely benefiting the company, I think you will progress in any company faster. And just take that bit of advice from me, and you will be fine.
Okay, well, how all of you have had different jobs. You've had some industry jobs, some academic jobs. You've moved. You were all in Houston. So how did you approach? These are key decisions in your life, and maybe for your family too, about moving to a different state, about moving from something that you know intimately, like academia, and moving to industry. How did you approach that decision making? Does that make sense? What process did you go through to be able to address those kind of decisions?
I could start on that one. So when I was in my third year, I believe, in grad school, we had a weekly lab meeting, and my PI, who I had an amazing relationship with, showed up to lab meeting one day and just said, "Oh, by the way, I'm moving to Seattle. If anybody wants to go, you're welcome to join me." And that was it. That was all he said. And so everyone in the lab kind of just tried to figure out what was going on, and I ended up being the only person who joined him, him and his wife, who also had a lab. And but I guess to answer your question, I'd lived and attended school in Texas most of my life, and all of my family, friends, and my whole network was there. And I originally just approached it as this is likely a short-term stint. I'll go out for a while, and I was continuing to be a Baylor student remotely, but I saw it as kind of just took it a year at a time, and just wanted to see how things turned out. And as it turned out, I really enjoyed the other location. I enjoyed the academic environment in Seattle, and then slowly just began to establish my life over here as well. So it was something that I just sort of saw as a short-term adventure, but it really just became like a big life change.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, my experience is fairly similar. Because of a life situation, I just leveraged some experience that I had, tried to find a position where I thought that I could experience it, see if I liked it, gain some experience outside of academia. And then it just turned out to be a really nice fit. And I've been with an organization I've really liked. But I just looked for getting a foot in the door, and I used the experience that I had to try and do that.
Yeah, when I finished my postdoc, I think location was not that important to me. I was married, but I didn't have kids, so this becomes more difficult when you have kids and have family. You buy a home, the location becomes kind of like a thing, a big factor in your life. So what I would suggest is that if you have the good fortune of having multiple offers, definitely take the location into account when you're making a decision. I think it always helps to be in one of the big, like if let's say if you're going into biotechs, it always helps to be near a big biotech center, and that's like helpful for you in the future if your company doesn't work out well or you want to make a career change. So try to find something that is, I will weigh an opportunity that is either in Boston or in San Francisco Bay Area higher than in a location where there aren't that many or that big of an ecosystem. So yeah, that's really important for your future. Maybe at this point, if you have just one offer, take it wherever it is. But then you should probably slowly move to one of those places before you start a family. That will always help you in the future.
Lauren, you have some thoughts on this?
I think the one thing I regret the most was not taking an opportunity when I was in college because I was afraid of failing. And I had, so, very much as Karen mentioned, I was a biology major, biochemistry major. And my department chair at the time kept pestering me wisely to learn how to code because I did not know how to do that. And bioinformatics was at the time a very burgeoning and nascent field. And he was encouraging me to go in that direction. I didn't do it then. I regretted it. GCC Tech certainly helped make up for lost time there. But I'd say the only thing to add to what my colleagues have already mentioned is when you're looking opportunistically, don't avoid something because it's a risk and it's something that, you're slightly fearful of. You all are intelligent people. You know when something is not a good fit for you versus when something might cause you to stretch beyond an area that you're comfortable with and grow, whether it's a move or a new role. And just want to encourage all of you to take advantage of your talents and be comfortable with a little bit of risk.
All right, well said, well said. So we've got about 10 minutes to go, a little bit more than 10 minutes. So I think the last question will be, what are some key insights gained throughout your career experiences that you would like to share? You'd like to highlight?
I can go and kind of coming off of what Lauren just said. I remember when I was applying for the senior scientist position, and I was really excited about it, but I was very nervous. I was very nervous that like the imposter syndrome was very real and strong. And I was like, they're expecting a lot out of me to step into this role. I'm not sure that I have what it takes. I'm not, am I going to be able to learn these things quickly? Am I going to, am I going to be what they are expecting? And it was fine and I loved it. But I was like kind of terrified. And also just leaving academia, it was very scary. And so, getting into it and getting settled and it going fine and being great. I just think it really comes down to like, sometimes you really just have to try something out to see if you like it. And if you don't like it, it's not the end. You can pivot, you can try something else. So I just really want to reiterate that I think, and also have faith in yourself, we're all intelligent people. You've got skill sets that are useful and helpful. And I'm sure you've got plenty of soft skills. So try not to feel too much of the imposter syndrome and don't let that get in the way of anything.
And I'll recommend too, if you haven't taken some of the GCC career development things like, an elevator pitch, things like that. We have someone coming in the middle of May who's actually a recruiter for Bristol Myers Squibb, former GCC trainee. I think she was in Hamby also, but which is the Houston Area Molecular Biophysics Program. So she's going to also kind of direct you toward, your resume development and, what it's like and what industry is looking for. So we have stuff like this happening all the time. So take advantage of this. This is going to help. You can put those things on your resume, maybe. Anyway, next person, next panelist who would like to address just some highlights about your career experiences.
Sure, I can go next. I mean, I have maybe 3 or 4 learnings from my experience in industry. I think the first one I would say is, I mean, obviously work hard is everywhere in whatever you do, but I think in industry, working smart is very, very important. And what that means is that you have limited time that you're spending on work. And then you want to make sure that you are working on something where you know how that's going to impact the core business of the company. That's very important because that's very different from academia. In academia, you can work on a very exciting problem that changes, biological understanding of something, and that could be something which in industry would be valued. But somebody who is actually working on a problem that is directly affecting the business of the company is going to be always valued higher than what you're doing, even if it might be a very simple problem to fix, right? So don't always go looking for complex problems. Look for low-hanging fruits that can make a major impact on the company's business. So that's something that I learned through my tenure there. Second thing that I would say is, always try to find mentors, and not just in your department, not just in your area of expertise, but cross-functionally. I think that's very important. These mentors are very important for your career growth, for giving you, and especially like, for example, in my career, I have always found that people who are outside of my domain gave me the best advice, were my champions, and helped me throughout my career. So make sure that you keep your circle big, you talk to a lot of people and make connections within the company and try to leverage them, and I mean, even if not, you're not leveraging them intentionally, but maybe those connections and those networks will help you, with sound advice later on. And then third thing that I would say is like, don't go into a comfort zone. Like I think if you get into a comfort zone where you are just cruising in your job, then you are setting yourself up for not a fast career growth trajectory. So I think you have to stretch yourself constantly. You have to, even if you think that, okay, I can't do X, Y, or Z, you have to raise your hand and say, okay, if nobody is doing X, Y, or Z, then I'm going to do it. And then you learn those skills that you need to do those X, Y, and Z functions, because nobody else can do it, and you will be the first person to do it, even if you can't do it perfectly. So don't let the, whatever is the phrase is, Lord, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, or whatever it is there. Just understand that, as academics, sometimes we have this tendency of being perfect, whereas in industry, perfect is not necessarily always something that is going to be valued very highly. It's like you are good enough to do something that is important. So those will be my three major takeaways from my industry experience.
Those are really good points. I would only add to what Ankur has shared with us by really hitting something that he said on the head very clearly to everyone. Do not fall in love with products or projects. Let me repeat it, because I've had to do this for my team. Do not fall in love with products or projects. Unlike academia, when you're in a corporate space, if things are are no longer meeting business objectives, or for other reasons, whole programs can be entirely dropped and removed on a dime. And it does not mean that the work that someone did is bad or unimportant. There are many things that are wonderful. You can become very passionate about it, but you have to be able to pivot and walk away pretty quickly. The second thing, know your company, whether it's a small company or a large one. When you get a new position, whether it is, heaven forbid, and some sort of an unpaid internship to something that's full-time, one of the first things that you should be doing, in my opinion, is talking to, say, 2 to 10 people a week, just asking them, what do you do? How does your department function? What's the overall structure of this company? How do you measure success? What do you think about failing? How does this group, learn from their failures and apply that forward? That I think can be a major differentiator especially for folks just starting off. And like many of us have said, in many cases, I think follow your passion, continue learning, but the difference between the painter and the artist is that the artist knows when to stop. So know when something is good enough, to be successful or to give you a result that's interpretable without double and tripling down on something that maybe will not drive business goals.
Yeah, let's see, what else can I add to all of that great feedback so far? So I think a couple of things, I was trying to think of what are the things that I try to mentor or try to teach some of our new PhD students that have now arrived. And I always feel like there's a period of time where I have to help them sort of like reframe their perspective of how they approach science in certain ways. A couple of things I try to think about are one of them is, I try to encourage people to just, there's always a certain amount of imposter syndrome for a lot of folks that come in. And I try to encourage them to just continue to just ask those really basic, simple questions up front, just to make sure that you are in full understanding of what's going on. Like don't be afraid to speak up and ask that question in a meeting, just so that you're on the same page as everyone else. Like it's okay. You're not going to look down. People can see that you just want to make sure that you're ready, you're engaged. But another thing that I find really important is that from transitioning from academia, whether you're coming in as somebody who's going to be working in the lab or you're going to be leading a team of lab-based researchers, you may be used to taking an approach where you're focused on drilling down into one specific area, all the way down to the basic mechanism of what's occurred. And in academia, that is critical. That's going to get you publications. That's going to change the direction of your field. But it's not what happens in industry most of the time. Most of the time, what is happening is if you're an experimental perspective, you're trying to figure out how quickly you can do the best science, the best experiment that informs the next decision that needs to be made. And oftentimes that next decision that needs to be made may not have, you know, volumes of science to back it up. Oftentimes these decisions that are made in industry have to be made at risk, knowing what we do know and knowing what we don't know, right? And so like if you can fill in just enough to inform that decision of what we know, with one really good experiment, that may be enough. And so like having to sort of like identify what are those experiments, or like experiment or set of experiments that would lead to that conclusion is great. But I always try to make sure that people understand within my teams, I'm in no way asking you to compromise, you know, scientific integrity. You know, hold on to your gut instincts of what's telling you that this is what you need to do, and then you tell me if you think this is something that's critical that needs to happen and it's going to take another week, but that's what's going to give you confidence that this is the right thing to do, then please tell me and please do it. And but let's see how quickly we can get to that place where we can make a decision at risk. And so it's a slightly different approach. We don't always drill down, but we try to do what we need to do.
Okay, one last little simple question. You guys work remotely or do you go into an office? And Lauren and David, I wonder if you know each other. You both work at the same company. Do you ever run into each other? You both live in the same, you know, northwest Washington area. Anyway, remote or go in?
I do both.
So
Yeah,
hybrid?
my region run position was full-time on-site. My Gritstone bio position was hybrid.
I'm fully on site.
Also hybrid.
Fully hybrid. Is that what you said, Lauren? Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. What a mix.
And unfortunately, David and I didn't get the chance to meet each other, so
Yeah,
we were
we were just
messaging.
talking offline. Yeah.
But
I
Well-
will add though for the hybrid comment, for me, it's because I mean, part of my job I could be doing remotely, and I do from time to time, but because I lead a lab-based group, it's important. It's important to come in, just see what's going on day to day, run into each other in the hallways. You just hear a lot of things like when you're on site, you know, just to help everyone, and it's important to maintain that rapport. It's important to maintain those connections. I think it's critical to be on site, especially if you're involved with a lab-based team. Yeah.
I'll reiterate a little bit. So part of my overview is sites that are based in New Jersey. So for those, I guess I'm technically remote, but for the site here, I'm on site. And as David said, it's nice to be here. It's nice to see people. And I think you get a better sense of how things are progressing when you're physically here. So.
Okay, well, we have run out of time. I can't tell you how much we appreciate all four of you sharing your insight, your experience, and you know, just being so honest and open about what it's like to be in industry and how you got there, and you know, what you like and dislike about it, and also so gracious for you to share your email addresses to everyone who's here. We will be again sending the link to the video and also sending email addresses so you can contact them with just you know, individual questions. Right. And I think we'll just say goodbye and thank you again for a really, really illuminating afternoon. We really appreciate it. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you. Take care.